Well, it is time to start. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And I would like, first of all, to thank IHKİB for its great collaboration with the IAF, with the International Apparel Federation. My name is Matthijs Clité, and I'm Secretary General of the IAF. IHKİB is one of our main members, one of our Turkish members. It is a pleasure now to start the presentation of this webinar and to introduce the important topic that we are discussing today. In the next hour, you will hear about export opportunities for Turkish manufacturers and brands from the perspectives of European, US, and Turkish experts, looking at the markets and the market developments. But of course, we cannot avoid to discuss the COVID-19 situation, which is severely affecting the markets, not only on the short and medium term, but also on the long term. So we will be talking about what you can expect to happen on these markets and what you can do as an exporter to navigate the dangers. And I think that's the most important one of all, to make use of the opportunities in these markets. So we will now first hear from our speakers, from our three speakers. And then we'll have a question and answer session. The question and answer session will allow you to ask questions. The chat function will open after our speakers have given their presentation. It's now my pleasure to first introduce our first speaker, Mr. Mehmet, who is a board member of IHKİB. He's owner and founder of TYH Textiles. Now, for those of you, and I think there are very few of the listeners that don't know this esteemed gentleman or his company, but it's a major Turkish knitwear company, 1.5 million pieces per month, gold supplier of PVH. And we're very happy to have you, Mr. Mehmet, as our first speaker. So I'd like to give the floor to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthias. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you in behalf of Turkish Association, Istanbul Exporters Association. And I hope this can be a very productive meeting for all the participants. These days we are living really extraordinary days because of these COVID issues. As you said, I mean, you mentioned this severe time, and we have to be aware of that. In respect, we have this new paradigm and arising within the world trade these days. Therefore, to increase awareness within the Turkish apparel sector and to give a message to our international partners as Istanbul Exporters Association, we started to organize international webinars in cooperation with IAF. This is the first webinar of this series, I can say. So we will continue to organize this kind of events together with the IAF in the following days as well. And different aspects of sectoral trading and issues will be discussed during these webinars. And we would like to thank you as IAF, Matthias, thank you very much for this participation and collaboration as well. I'll give you a brief about Turkish Exporters Association. Turkish apparel sector is one of the biggest supplier of the world, you know. We are the 6th biggest supplier within the global apparel exporters and the 3rd biggest supplier for European Union. We think the most important feature that differentiates us in the world market is our ability to meet demands of each buyers quickly and efficiently. This is the result of integrated and end-to-end production infrastructure of our sector. Flexibility and the capability to bringing efficient solution are our proficiencies. Our sector also has an organization ability which leads us to the forefront of world markets. Today, the dynamics of the world apparel global chain and the actors are evolving, and this requires new approaches in being competitive. The speakers of this seminar will talk about these changes and new approaches in the United Nations and European Unions as well today. So in the coming periods, we are expected to experience more rigid market conditions. That's we are expecting. Reliability is going to be main trade relations issues, I guess. Green and sustainable production processes is going to be one of the main topics. Digital sourcing and digital base of networks. Local and nearshoring sourcing supply chain is going to be very important. Turkish apparel sector is able to adopt these conditions, being flexible and quick are always our leading competitive advantages. Our trading partners are always trusted us on that aspect, and we want them to trust us as well in the future. We have to support each of our trading partners in this difficult period because period is not really experienced before, and Turkish apparel sector is ready for this. Before finishing my words, I'd like to thank you all the participants and speakers of an IAF as well, and we wish an efficient and fruitful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mehmet, for a great introduction. Now it's my time again to introduce our second speaker, who is going to talk about the US market. Now, we heard Turkey is not just a regional player, it's a global player. So it has already quite a lot of exports to the US. And of course, everybody is interested to hear how those could be grown. So we want to share with you an insight story to give you inside information about the developments on this market. Our speaker is Chris Breyer. Chris is a global supply chain fashion sourcing expert. He has combined this background with a high-level sales and business development experience. He has a long experience with the Magic Show. More than 30 years of fashion and soft home sales and sourcing knowledge across a wide variety of categories, not just one product category. Mr. Breyer provides US market education seminars for international suppliers. So I think he is very used to making the bridge between the developments on the market of the US and manufacturers, suppliers. And that is exactly what we want to hear. So, Chris, we're all looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Matthias. I appreciate that very nice introduction. Yep, I've been at this a while, and I've made my living on matching proper manufacturing with a buyer, pretty much most of my career. So, I had to learn, otherwise I wasn't going to make a living on how to make a long-term relationship. So I'm here to talk a little bit about what's going on in the US market today. And I'm going to cover a few different points, some a little bit beyond that, based on what we've learned from COVID here in the US market, options to enter the US market, overall trends in sourcing and consumer trends. So first I want to talk about what's going on in the USA market today, right now. It's a very fluid market, so things can change week to week here. So we have a second wave of coronavirus that's kind of swept across a good portion of the nation, not everywhere, but a lot of the major centers. Los Angeles, where I'm from, is certainly a place where we're having a second wave. It's not as bad as the first one, and I do believe that we're responding a little bit differently, a little smarter. We learned a little bit the first time around. They're not closing down as many things, so the economy is not being as impacted. However, it's still, it's still kind of a setback for us here. Prior to that, before the second wave, we had seen a very nice resurgence of brick and mortar retail when we opened back up. There was a tremendous amount of pent-up demand. Literally, there's videos of people lined up to get into stores all day long after these stores finally opened back up. So I think they were ready to go shopping. It's a little disappointing for us, that it's shut down, you know, somewhat since then. The consumer is certainly doing, you know, doing everything they can to go shopping. You know, our online business is up, obviously, like everybody else's. The big box stores, Walmart, Target, Costco, their businesses are really, really strong right now. They've remained open throughout the entire, you know, COVID-19 problem because they have food, and they were designated as being important to stay open, and therefore all of their clothing sales also continued. Why other stores like Kohl's and JCPenney, they don't sell food, so they were closed. Yeah. So, you know, that's pretty much where we're at right now. The future and overall sourcing trends, as I see them as we're moving forward. A lot of you in the Turkish apparel industry, I'm sure, have already moved to medical textiles, making masks, making other PPE, gowns, et cetera, et cetera. This business has kind of exploded within our family of factories. We weren't really, most of the factories that I knew were not doing this before. This business is quite strong here. I'm sure it's quite strong everywhere else. There's a lot of business being done in the United States on FDA approved medical textiles, whatever they may be. It's an opportunity. I do know some people that have been buying products in Turkey, so I know that there's some industry there. And I think that, you know, Turkey's starting to assert itself here because there's a lot of people that are trying to buy outside of China. China's kind of got a bad reputation with a lot of fake product, and we've seen some, we've seen a good portion of the buyers say, see if you can find something outside of China for me. As far as the buyers buying product, when COVID is over, the people with inventory will be the people that succeed. If you don't have inventory, you can't sell it. Frank is a retail expert in Europe. I'm sure it'll be the same there. The trick is who can, you know, who can have the right inventory, and can they have it at the proper time? And I have seen, you know, lately, some very, very large numbers of products being placed overseas, huge numbers, because they're anticipating that they're going to need to be open and delivering product in November, December, in January. That's the hope. And I think they're pinning that, a lot of that, on the vaccine timing, that the consensus on vaccine timing, which is going to be end of the year, January, when the vaccine starts. So, but there is business that is coming, because an empty store is a bankrupt store. So there's opportunity in the United States now. I think it could you know, Mehmet can speak to it, whether he's seeing business flow into Turkey better than me, but I see a lot of outbound business coming out of the United States right now, particularly from the bigger buyers. They're stepping up. So I think that we have a renewed, what I call ABC, anywhere but China type of mentality in the United States. We had it for a while. It had started to kind of level off, but COVID has changed a lot of people's mentality about the risks in China. The risks in China are huge. And they will remain, you know, we will remain doing business with China because a lot of materials come out of China. But to reduce the risk, people are pushing their way out of China as fast as they can again. There's been a lot of, I'm sure people that read Sourcing Journal, there's several good stories about what's going on with big buyers are saying, you know, we're hoping to be out of China, but buying no sewn product in China. If the material comes from there, that's between them and the factory. That's kind of the attitude here with a lot of buyers. And they'll do what they can. Of course, we all know that we cannot completely exit China. It's impossible for most categories to do that. But I think that bodes well for Turkey. It bodes well for Egypt. It bodes well for Pakistan, for a lot of countries. Obviously, Turkey's very well placed, having already being a well-established country all over the globe. So another thing that I want to talk about is, you know, what did we learn from COVID? You know, I'm sure everybody learned a lot, and you learned a lot depending on where, you know, where you were placed, what level you are in the industry. You learned a different lesson. But the lesson I learned is that every manufacturer and factory in the world has far more risk than they thought they did. That's the first thing that I learned. They were working on margins that did not take that risk into consideration, and that's obvious in a lot of places. I don't know if that, you know, how much that is true in Turkey, but in places like Bangladesh, it's obviously very, very true. The thin margins they worked on did not cover the risk that they actually had. And in Bangladesh is in real trouble. People are actually looking to get out of Bangladesh because they feel that they're too exposed to Bangladesh right now. Another good opportunity, I think, for Turkey and people in Turkey that are manufacturing in Egypt. There's a lot of business out there right now to grab, particularly in denim or anything that's in high duty for Egypt. So we learned another thing about COVID that I think manufacturers need to consider is the force majeure clause in the contracts that buyers are giving them. It gives them the ability to cancel an order for any reason they see fit, basically, and you're going to have to go fight it in a U.S. court. We found out that doesn't work, and that really, really hurt a lot of people because that was the clause they used to cancel their orders without paying for the fabric or any other part of the out-of-pocket costs that the factories had. I've been speaking to governments about looking into that, outlawing a force majeure clause. That you need to show a real reason why you're not taking the merchandise in, you know, rather than just make one up. Basically, it allows you to make up a reason not to take merchandise. Really hurt a lot of factories. And I'm sure factories in Turkey suffered the consequences as well. And LCs, you know, we used to do business. I've been doing business overseas for so long. It used to be an LC business. It protected everybody. More and more credit has been given. And you know, Frank can speak to this because Europe and High Street, you know, London particularly, they have really been a lot of problems with getting paid from them and you know, giving them credit and then just backing out of the deal after you've already purchased all of the materials, et cetera, and your people, your workers are left high and dry. So I think that, you know, those trends are going to shape the future for the next 2 to 3 years on how factories deal with buyers. The factories will remember who hurt them and who did not. And hopefully it'll create a more level playing field for the factory. I've always, even though I've sold to every retailer there is, I've sold to most, you know, a lot of brands, but I'm a factory person. You know, my dad had a factory and I grew up in the factory. So factories are where I believe buyers make their money, from factories. So options to enter the U.S. market. The U.S. market it's a tough market. If you're not in, it's not an easy market to enter. And, it can be an expensive market to enter. To open up a showroom in New York City and show your brand there or have your product there really costs an immense amount of money. And there's not a lot of, small to medium factories that could even think about affording something like that. So that limits, that's the fastest way to break into the market, is have your own showroom with a salesperson and, have them working every day. It's also the most expensive. There are multi-brand showrooms you can work with, or agents you can work with. Things like this, it's another way to enter the market. It's usually how most factories do it, because it's an easy way. It's not necessarily the best way to enter the market, but I think it's an inexpensive way to enter the market. You get orders, you pay for them. I think that trade shows have been traditionally a good way to meet new buyers. You get some subsidies from the government, but I'm a little concerned with the trade show industry as we go forward. I think buyers are going to have more travel budget cuts, and it's going to be harder to find buyers at trade shows, even when they do open back up, frankly. I think COVID kind of changed it. I'm not so sure about fashion. We'll see. Fashion, during COVID, people tried to do it digitally. You need to see samples in fashion, and everybody needs to see them at the same time in a room. And I found that it just doesn't work. You have to be able to have a face-to-face with a sample in your hand. It doesn't work without that. So we're going to need to find a way to get in front of people one way or another eventually. And we'll see how the trade show side of thing works out. But I think 2021 even is going to be a very tough year for trade shows. So getting in front of buyers might be a little bit harder than it used to be. However, offsetting that, I feel that the buyers are actually looking to rebalance out of China. So therefore, you'll probably have a lot of inquiries, if you're not getting them already, from people that are looking to move their production. So let me see what I missed here. Obviously, I'm going to speak to a couple of things that are big in Turkey. Denim is, something that I have a lot of experience with, and I think Turkey's probably the best country in the world at this point right now at making denim. And Turkey has particularly within the denim business, I think has a great opportunity to grab even more USA market share right now. So that your Turkish manufacturers can grab this business, over the next 12 months. Between their factories in Turkey and their factories in Egypt, I think they're well placed to grab a lot of business. And if I was in Turkey, I'd be pushing very hard in the United States right now within denim. Knits is another area. Turkey makes beautiful, high quality knit product. I think especially for brands here, there's another opportunity there. And again, it's really fueled by the exit from China, and Turkey being just an obvious choice. I can tell you from the buyers that I speak to, my buyers, every single one of them would like to be out of China. Every single one of them. They can't, but they want to be. And if you and part of the reason is capacity. If you gave them a reason, they leave. As simple as that. I've already moved a couple of people out of China on very large programs. You just have to give them a good reason to go. So that pretty much is where we stand in the USA market right now. I do think that the market here is bright. I could see it in the pent-up demand when people opened. I think it's worth pursuing right now. I don't think for countries other than China, there's probably hasn't been this level of opportunity in a very long time. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope there was some value there for everybody. And I'll be ready for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Chris. And it's always good to hear positive outlook and to hear that opportunities are the predominant factor even when the situation is really tough.
Yes.
So that's good to hear.
I can say one last thing since I have probably a minute or two left. In my career, which is pretty long, every time I've been able to have my best success was during some sort of problems or crisis somewhere, whether it was on a local level or on a bigger level like this. When there is problems, there is maximum opportunity to solve problems. Everybody's looking for their savior. And that's why I think that non-China, because China has dominated the industry so much and people are finally looking at getting out of there, it's just unbelievable opportunity. The people who jump quickest and move fastest will win. It's that simple. Real quick, and then I'm going to let Frank take over here, but I'm going to tell you what buyers say to me. Okay, I have an office in Pakistan. Buyers say to me, Chris, I love all your stuff. I just wish whenever we talk to the people, they don't snap to it like the Chinese do. Boom, boom, boom. They're like, you tell them you want something, the next day they've got 3 different options for you. Okay. In Pakistan, you wait a week and you follow up twice. And so, that's the only thing they tell me. They're still looking to get out of China because but let that be a lesson. The people who do that will be the people who are easiest to take your business and turn it over to them. So I would say for factories, when a buyer wants something, jump now and move quick and grab the business away from your competition. That's it. So that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I'm in business too. We're all in business. That's what I'm trying to do in order to make it work. And it's been successful, So
I think that's one of the main differences between European sourcing and US sourcing, that European sourcing has been a little bit more maybe diversified, relying on more countries.
Yes.
With a little bit stronger emphasis on close by. So the link between Europe and Turkey is already very well established.
Solid, like a rock. It's Europe and Turkey go together perfectly because of the proximity and the speed to market. The Zara model, everybody in the world knows, how much business Zara is doing in Turkey. Because of that speed that they're able to get out of Turkey, it works for them. I like what they're doing with Turkey. They're not so hung up on their giant margins. They want to move goods at reasonable margins and just get really good, high quality product quickly. So,
that's it.
Yeah.
But yeah, in order to hear what's happening in Europe, we are turning to Frank Quicks.
Yes.
So thanks a lot, Chris. We'll get back to you later with the questions.
Thank you.
So we're lucky to have Frank, who has over 25 years of experience as a retail consultant, an academic lecturer as well. As his presentation comes up, he started his career at EY, followed by Deloitte, and since 2003 he's been running his own a renowned agency in the Netherlands, Q&A Insights. But Q&A is also the Dutch member of a larger group, the Abeltoft Group, an international group of independent brand and retail experts. And since 2019, Frank Quicks is the chairman of this group. So that's you, Frank. I would like to give you the floor, and we hear about what's happening in Europe.
Yeah. Thank you for the nice introduction, Matthijs, and Chris, thank you for your presentation. I would like to talk about the fashion value chain and then the total reset of it. So the challenge today in the value chain is that the sustainability of itself is the biggest challenge. And we really have to move from a push-driven, with oversupply-based supply chain to something else. And I think COVID-19 will accelerate this change. And there are several items happening currently in the retail environment. For retail, first of all, due to COVID, traffic is down. Secondly, sales is down. That's based on that traffic is down. But secondly, also because the need for new stuff is down as well. And this week, over the weekend, we got a great McKinsey report in where you could see that 60% of the consumers are saying that they are changing their purchases based on their needs. So they say they will even up to 60% down in spendings just because they are buying what they are really needing. And then there's the third factor, and it's a very important factor because productivity is the most important factor to run in a retail environment. And in retail, we only have three assets. We have square meters or square feet, we have stock, and we have people. And we have to make them as productive as possible. But what we see currently is that sales per square meter are down due to the fact that there are fewer people in town. So sales per square meter is heavily down. Then if I'm looking at the sales rate, so the stock turn, it's down as well because we got a lot of products shipped in, but are not moving because there's no sale. So that's something that we really have to get into production again. And then the last one is also the productivity per salesperson. It's down because we, although we have the relief in many European countries where we get some relief from funds from the governments, but nevertheless, it's not making up for everything. So, and even in some countries, if you are taking the funds, you are not allowed to let people work. So then your sales turn, especially on sales per person, will go down. So there's no sales, there's no future. And if we're looking at the fashion industry, sales is heavily down in Europe. And especially if you're looking at to the numbers compared to last year, then March sales in fashion was down minus 57%. In April, it was down minus 80%. Yes, 80. So 80% down. And in May, although Eurostat said there was a major improvement and the best improvement since they are measuring sales monthly by month, because it was only down 50% compared to last year. Of course, that's an improvement compared to April, but it's still painful. And you have to keep in mind, a retailer can only bear -3 or -5%. And if it is an extremely healthy company, maybe they can bear -8%, but nobody can bear and stand -50. So if you don't know how long this will take, then you really have to move from tactics to strategy. So there is no way that anybody can tell us how long this will go on with COVID-19. So we really have to become and prepare for a new strategy. So from my perspective, I believe that the best insurance you can have is think logically, because that's your best way you can save everything. I believe that sales will fall also later this year. And I even believe they will be steeper than they were so far. Online will increase, but online, especially for traditional retailers, is a weaker business model. It comes at an extremely high cost for traditional physical retailers. So yes, everybody's talking about omni-channel, but omni-channel is a very expensive part of the business model of a retailer. So we really have to make sure that if we want to save this and make the best of it, we have to start and think logically. So we have to challenge the status quo. But how can we do this? So how can we make this together? Because quite often retailers are start talking to you as supplier, and suppliers are trying to convince the retailers, but we have to find another way. And I believe that it's within everything that's in the supply chain. And maybe we have to start rethinking the supply chain. So what we have to do is that we have to move from value chain to partner chain. And I think that's the only way out. And this means that we have to move from push to pull. We have to move from seasonal to flexible. We have to move from margin to contribution. And we have to move from selling goods to collaborating. And in the end, this means not the product is king, the customer is king. So we have to start with the customer. And a way we could do this is that we could start thinking of have your stock as high up as possible in the supply chain. But as we share more data, this can be lower in the supply chain. We have to make more drops. So that's what Chris just commented on the Zara model. So that's something we have to make as well. And then also what Chris just referred to with Zara is that that's moving from margin to contribution. And in the end, we are making money with euros of margin or with US dollars of margin and not with percentages. And this business was too long a percentages business. So if we are moving from margin to contribution, if we are moving from selling to collaboration, then this means also that retailers have to rethink their position. Because if you are taking more risks as suppliers, then they have to work with lower margins. But in the end, I believe that the productivity will go up. So the productivity in sales will go up. The productivity in sales rate will go up, and also the sales per FTE. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank, very much for this insight. And it really shows that the situation is a lot more complex than sitting and waiting out this COVID-19 crisis. Waiting for the sales to bounce back again and then continuing business. Nothing changed because a lot has changed. And buyers may not be there even at some point after a while, which I think is also what you're saying, that we can expect quite a lot of bankruptcies, and it's important as a supplier to navigate that landscape and to make sure that you're not doing business with too many firms that will eventually not make it, and that by changing your business model as a supplier or trying to change that, you can find the right type of customers that will survive.
But Thijs, if you're looking at it, and that's as what Chris stated, if there are no goods in a store, then you're a bankrupt store. So that's what in the end will happen. But if you're now looking at retailers, if they don't have money, they can't buy goods. So that's something, and currently even they do have goods, but they have the wrong goods. And that's was also one of the points Chris was making. We need the right stuff at the right time, at the right location. The only problem is that the guys who have to buy it, they just don't have the money. So we really have to rethink that part of the supply chain, because that's really, and I really would challenge everybody, move from supply chain, from value chain to partnership chain, because that's where I think in the end we can meet each other. And what's important there is also, if you're thinking of that, this will change the model also, how you will divide the margins between the different players in the market. So within the chain, the margins have to be differentiated in a different way.
Okay, so if I can ask you now, and I know you come from the retail end, but you look at the entire supply chain. Now we look at this through the perspective of the supplier. So knowing that these are some of the structural changes that are taking place, what should a supplier do? So if you were the owner of a factory and you know this information, how does that translate into your strategy as a supplier? How do you approach your existing and probably new clients also?
Very good question, Matthias. If you're thinking of that, so first of all, what I would do if I would be a supplier, I would make an assessment of my retailers, because the first assessment we have to make now is who will be the winners, who will be the losers. Because your biggest risk now is sending stuff, and even if you're thinking of delaying the payments, which I would not start thinking of now, but if you would eventually do that, then you're at a great risk, because you really have to make the assessment who are the winners, who are the losers. At the other hand, if you're thinking of to deal with those retailers, so if you have made the right assessment, how can we manage that we can be faster with drops? And I think that's where is the big advantage for Turkey over Bangladesh or China or Vietnam, that you can be faster. Because I believe nearshoring will be an important one, but also what suppliers really should start thinking of, stop with your oversupply. Because in total, we have way more supply than demand. And I think also demand will go down, not only due to COVID, not only due to financial situations, no, due to the fact that people will buy less. They don't need every week a new t-shirt.
Yeah. So that is what this system, what is part of the reset of the system that people are looking at, or critically what they need. That might be different in Europe than in the US, where maybe the pent-up demand is not as big in Europe, which is more driven by fast fashion than maybe in the US. Before I ask you a question, though, Chris, I would like to invite all the listeners to send in their questions through the Q&A or chat function in the Zoom application. So if you want to ask a question, feel free. I have already received some, so I can pose some of those questions to speakers. But go ahead and add some additional ones.
Matthias, I want to really just quickly, if I may, add something. Frank,
yes, please.
To Frank's points, okay? Which,
yes,
because
fine,
Frank's speaking from the retail perspective, and I'm speaking, I think we're quite aligned, his retail perspective and my manufacturing perspective. You know, in manufacturing, we've been working on a demand model, which is the pull model that Frank is talking about, as opposed to push. model where you're pushing a bunch of stuff into the stores and hope it sells. This is where it's sold before it's taken. Now, before it's manufactured in some cases. And these factories are popping up. It works very well in certain categories. Other categories, we're not ready for it yet. But, you know, I'll give an easy category, screen print t-shirts. Wouldn't it be easier to just own the blank tees and print them after each consumer ordered it? That means you have no inventory that's dangerous. A blank tee is worth a blank tee. You know, your inventory risk goes down by 80%. So demand manufacturing, as technology grows, more categories will become demand driven. And that way, when you don't have inventory, you keep all your money that you actually made. You never give any of it back. That's the beauty of that model. And I you know, there's a lot of statistics to back up in some categories how it's working. Amazon is using it. They bought 40 Kornit printing machines to do all of their screen tees. They put them in their DCs around the country. You know, their margins go up like tremendously because they have no stock of already printed tees anymore. It is happening. And in the United States, we're seeing a lot of it. The only factory that can really survive in the United States is kind of a demand-driven factory. Otherwise, what's the point? You know, you're guaranteeing no markdowns to your buyer by being a demand-driven factory. It's a very compelling sales pitch. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good addition. I think it does depend on the product and the market, but I think you can devise a strategy between a buyer and a supplier to reduce the fashion risk and the markdowns, and to work from, as Frank said, margin to contribution for any product. The strategies will look slightly different. Will not all go as far as only producing purely on demand. There will be hybrids.
It's a hybrid. It's hybridized. Some categories could be done purely on demand. Other categories cannot. And the hybrid between them, you'll hybridize part of the manufacturing process. The retailer will step up and say, you know, we're going to use this denim across our men's and our boys. So we're gonna give you money to put stock in there. You know, that way you can flip the goods in 2 weeks for us if we have an emergency, particularly if you're shipping it to Europe. You know, you could actually have the goods from Turkey into a DC in Germany in 2 weeks if the fabric's there and you have an open line. And so there'll be ways to mitigate. You know, speed to market and fast fashion are two different things. And I think people don't understand that. You know, fast fashion is kind of means different things to different people. I started
Chris, to that, if you're looking at fast fashion, that's 100% push driven. Whereas speed to market, that's pull driven. And right. That's the big difference. So we were lucky. Over the past 5 to 10 years, we became lazy also over the past 5 to 10 years. And what I believe COVID is bringing us now is that it will be challenging how you are buying goods, how you are selling the goods as a manufacturer, how you are dealing with the designs getting in, because normally you're sitting, waiting till they get in, the buyers, that they are getting to your factory, that are showing you the new designs. Now, that's also a great opportunity, because more digital. Because if we can make this more digital and learn how we can work together, even using Zoom or Microsoft Teams for having buying conversations, showing products. Okay, I know everybody in this industry wants to feel the jacket, but you know, if we just send in the fabric and you can feel the fabric and we are start making it, I know it's not 100% the same, but it can increase the speed. And speed to market, I totally agree with Chris. That's the key. And it's not fast fashion.
Yeah, totally agree.
It's done.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for the for the conversation there. I would like to go back a little bit to you, Chris, to an earlier point that you were making on very practical advice to suppliers to the US market, because you were saying that trade fairs, you are not clear on their strength in the future. Obviously, the more like traditional methods of investing in a in a shop front, basically as a supplier, or working with agents are there, but relatively expensive, or not easy. What do you think at this moment would be the best way to get the attention of those US buyers that are looking, that's the good part, for other opportunities, but how do you stand out? How do you draw the attention of the US buyers as a Turkish supplier?
Well, Turkey's already somewhat at an advantage because of Made in Turkey is a brand. To be frank.
It is in the US.
Okay. Made in Turkey in the United States.
Okay.
And probably in Europe as well. They know quality when they see it.
Yeah.
And I really have never seen a really bad garment out of Turkey myself. You know what I mean? I don't think that the factories in Turkey like to ship crummy garments. They just don't like, it's not what they do. And I've seen crummy garments from just about everywhere. But Turkey is known to be high quality. So you're already starting off in Turkey. I think you have an advantage. It's like, let's say, made in Portugal. Made in Portugal means something in the United States amongst buyers. They know Portugal has quality in certain kind of things that they make. So I think that the trade fair, here's what I think about trade fairs. They'll still be there. I'm going to, consolidation of retail. Every time there's consolidation, you wipe out a bunch of buyers right out of your trade show. Okay, you just wiped them out because they got consolidated into the same buyer somewhere else that maybe you're not even shipping that buyer. So this consolidation makes it very, very difficult, on trade shows, because the trade show business is not about getting manufacturers. Believe me, it's about the buyers. If you bring the buyers, they'll line up to get into your trade show. I've been in the trade show business and I do know it. This business is a buyer-driven business, the trade show business. And in the other side, all you're doing is selling real estate. That's the business. And it's not going to, the buyers are going to have their travel budgets cut. And that's going to be it. And they've already had them cut, and it's been why trade shows have been having less buyers and less buyers. Travel budget cuts and consolidation. It just doesn't play to a trade show. So I think really the only, your only options are, you got a few options. You have people that don't compete with each other can work together and go in and get a showroom. So you could have 2 or 3 companies making different products, go in and get a showroom. A showroom in New York City could cost you $25,000 a month in rent. Okay, a nice showroom in New York City. A showroom in LA is much, much cheaper. Much cheaper. But, some people like to be in New York. So that's one option. Showrooms in LA right now, you can get a deal. And you can definitely get a good deal. So that's an option. The other is just an agent that has a showroom that's going to properly represent your product, but not only your product, because when they represent only your product, it's going to cost you. And so it just depends on what level you're on and where, how much you want to invest. But they're really, you can't just do it digitally. You cannot open a customer digitally. You can continue a business digitally. You can you can do less face-to-face as you get a good relationship built. But I don't think you can open a customer digitally. It just doesn't, there's no way. Not a meaningful customer. I mean, you can't open Target digitally. It's never going to happen. Just not.
That's very clear. Yeah, that's how the old and the new are still intertwined and combined. So
right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, they are going to be in this business. You know, Frank's right. We've been lazy. We've been super lazy. I mean, we haven't just been lazy. We've just been resting on our laurels for that 10 years, just letting it keep going, thinking this is never going to end. What a party we're having. And, you know, that's always a recipe for complete disaster. So, yeah, no, we have to digitize what we can. Start with the low-hanging fruit and digitize what we can so we can take one time-consuming step out. Speed to market is not done by chopping a week off your delivery. It's literally hour by hour by hour off your turnaround time on whatever that is. People, you know, I've been in a lot of factories in my life. I go into a lot of factories where they tell me, oh, I have my engineers. And I go in that factory and I'm looking how long it takes to go from here to here. And I know there's no engineer that knows anything in that factory. And, you know, there's a lot of room for efficiency improvement in our model of buyer to factory and all the things that go back and forth in getting an order placed, pre-production and purchased and shipped. It's just a huge amount of free-flowing information. We could digitize half of it that we haven't been, probably. Yeah. Some parts we can't digitize, but that alone might save you 4 days. And I can tell you that 4 days reduces your risk, reduces the retailer's risk. Believe me. I started Speed to Market in 1995 with Mervyn's, and you know, a long time ago when I was able to show them me making it in Guatemala was way, way more profitable for you than you making it for 30 cents less in India. And I took all the business away because I had an open-minded buyer. No one else would, you know, 30 cents more, get out of here. But I had an open-minded buyer at Mervyn's, and so efficiency matters.
A good thing beyond the margin, right? So
yeah, beyond this, I need 71% IMU.
Yeah.
And you're grinding me for 10 cents and you're working on 71% IMU. That is the model of a lot of fast fashion retailers like Forever 21 bankrupt, Route 21 bankrupt. I could go on and on. They're all bankrupt.
Yeah, yeah. That brings me. Margin. That brings me back to Frank. A difficult question. Okay. Can you say something about, and if you can't name names, then maybe about the type of companies, but what European brands and retailers do you think are currently doing better, are shown by this crisis that they have been on the right path already?
I think most are still on the old schedule, and I think it's even if you're thinking of companies like Zara and H&M, I think they're on the old schedule. So even we are awarding them for the fast way they are running it, but I think it's really about, as Chris said, speed to market instead of fast fashion. So first of all, I think what will happen in the next 6 months, and especially Q4 2020 will be a very important one. I think we will see the bankruptcies in Europe at the end of Q4, whereas and also the store closures where we saw them already in the US. They are already announced, and especially if you're looking at the department stores, it's happening there way earlier, and that's just the difference that quite some European governments gave money to the companies to keep their people at work. So virtual, we have many unemployed people, but are now paid by the government. So, so the number of stores will go down, which I believe is good because we had oversupply. And at the same time, I can imagine that quite some of the listeners are selling to those companies. So they are their customers, they are their clients, and they won't be around anymore. So I think in the end, it will be all about price quality level. So what I believe what will happen is that consumers in Europe will evaluate quality at a higher and a better level than they ever did before. So they want to buy good products at a reasonable price. So I'm not saying that prices will go down like hell, but they are searching for good price quality level. Whereas in past years, you know, and that's what we all did in the industry. We created a monster and it's called a consumer. And we made them buy our products because we gave them the opportunity to buy the products. And that's something we have to change. You know, we can say it's all about the consumer. The consumer is not acting in the right way. You know, we are part of the supply chain as they are. So, and they are just sitting at the very end of the supply chain. So if we want to make a change, if we want to be different, we can.
Yeah. So I guess it requires good conversations with your clients to find this out as a supplier. What is the strategy of this client to survive in this type of market? To be among those companies that are not going to disappear. And that's the right strategy. I think we're moving towards the end. I would like to raise a very different question, maybe from both sides of the Atlantic. What about the large internet players, the online players, the pure online players, the big platforms like Amazon or new players? Do you think, and I'll start with Frank, do you think they will gain a lot of market share now quickly? And do you think that will have implications for suppliers as well, or am I covering too much?
You know, they did. If you're just looking at the announcement by Zalando last week, where they gave a business update that they will reach higher sales and a better gross margin and a better return in the end. That's what they expect. If I'm looking at my clients, so I have quite some fashion retailers, and they moved extremely quickly towards the platforms in Europe, and they had to do it because you know, some of my clients, they had many stores in Germany and France. Everything was closed, so everything was in a lockdown. So I live in a strange country in the Netherlands because we call it a lockdown, but the only thing that we really locked down were the restaurants and fitness schools, and the rest remained open. And that's what we thought was a lockdown. So many companies had to move to the platforms. They start selling on it. What we saw so far is that quite some, because they also saw their own sales on their own website, and they saw that new customers came in. And of course, this is not for the multi-brand retailers. This is especially for the vertical integrated retailers, because they can run also on platforms at a way higher cost. So don't misunderstand me, but yeah, I think the online players and you know, probably Amazon in the US, you know, they take a way bigger share than they do in some countries in Europe. But I think if you're looking at Germany, Italy, Amazon is a massive player, even next to Zalando, even in fashion.
Yeah. So this is something to take into account. And do they? What does that mean as a supplier? If Zalando suddenly becomes
go direct. No,
yeah.
That's no, but you know, if you start rethinking the channel conflict, because you know, I have worked with many brands. And one of them, I'm more than willing to name also one, which is a very old family-based business in the Netherlands. It's Van Bommel. It's a shoe manufacturer. And 8 years ago, I was with the CEO. I was in San Francisco. We went to many startups, and we were sitting in the bus, something you can't imagine today. But we were sitting in the bus talking to each other, and then he said, I will never go directly. I said, why? And then at the end of our trip, he said, well, if I'm back, we will start penciling on a white piece of paper how we could go directly. And I think that's something you really should consider, because he said, well, I never can do it because I have the channel conflict. When we came back, he really understood that he never could reach with his current channel that many people.
Yeah.
Online, you can reach more people. So what is important, you need a brand, you need good goods, and you really have to be a very good supplier, because those online players, they ask way more discipline from you than physical retailers.
Yeah, I think that's an important difference. That's an important difference, but also the idea to go direct, to not discount that. If that is, you know, if you can dream it, you can probably think of doing it. So that could be an interesting part as well. Thanks, Frank. And for Chris, I turn to you. What do you think in the US? We haven't really discussed that too much. The position of the online players, is that changing the market dramatically, even more than it has in the US?
It's you know, I think that obviously it's growing. That business is growing. You know, COVID has been a catalyst, and it definitely a catalyst for further growth, quicker growth, more accelerated. Amazon is a major player with brands. There's no doubt about it. Fulfillment by Amazon, to Frank's point, is quite complicated. You know, they take a huge cut. You know, I think, if I'm not mistaken, if you're a foreign-owned business, they take even a bigger cut. It's a little bit of a, at least for U.S. sales. And then you've got to ship the goods over here and hope it sells. And then what do you do with it if it doesn't? There's other players in the market. There's somebody called Shopify, which is probably the only platform that is on Amazon's radar over here. They're making a lot of noise. Shopify, it's a lot easier to set up. You can ship it yourself. They don't really have a fulfillment situation, and it connects to everything automatically, including Amazon. It's what I use. I could tell you, forget that channel, worried about your channel stuff. That's so old. It's like every single brand I know goes direct to consumer here. They all do it. They don't undercut the customers that you're selling to. So say if you're selling to Macy's and your product retails at 48, if you sell it for 36 on your site, they're going to be upset with you. But they don't say anything if you're selling it at full retail. And that what would be the point to go online if you can't take advantage of you know, that retail margin that you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
So it does require discipline. You have a tremendous amount of returns, et cetera, et cetera. It's a different business. That you're a retailer now. It requires merchandising. But it is, you know, it's already being done by Turkish brands. You know, there's a lot of Turkish brands here in the US, and they're already on Amazon, and they're, you know, maybe some of them have a Shopify store. I think it's important, you know, there are buyers in the United States, maybe it's the same, prefer to buy direct from the actual brand at the same price than say, why go to Nordstrom? I'd just rather buy it direct. I know exactly what fits me. I can just buy direct from the brand now. There's something about buying direct, whether it gives you any real benefit or not. People like it. And, you know, if you can add $1 million of retail to a $20 million or $30 million wholesale business, you know, why not? So I think it's very important. And you don't have to worry about retailers complaining anymore. It's over with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your contributions, for your insights. I think we now know more about the US and European current situation, and we also realize that it's a very complex situation. COVID-19 is not leaving any stone unturned, I think. So I'd like to thank you very much for your contribution, and I would like to pass the word back to IHKİB, to Mr. Ahmed, to close the webinar.
Thank you, Matthias. Yeah, apparently, when we're just talking about these COVID issues, first of all, I think more than manufacturing, instead of better manufacturing, I think we need better management in this case, because purchasing practices are changing, not only in customer base and also the manufacturing base as well, I guess. So this different business modeling is coming through, and different discipline is going to be in charge. So we need to get closer to each other as a manufacturer. And when we just Turkey perspective of this issue, first of all, Turkey is digitalizing everything as possible, as Chris said, and it's really a priority of our manufacturing base at the moment. You know, Turkey is a well-established setup for mainly for European buyers. And as he mentioned, personally, I have an office in New York, just introduced the Turkish market as a good example from Turkey to the United States, which we have major customers coming from US to Turkey. And I like this idea from Frank being a partner chain instead of supply chain, which is really good because it really works, Frank, because we've been doing this for PVH last 10 years, actually, in Amsterdam. Now I'm planning to open an office in Amsterdam just to closer to those customers, because at the end of the, you know, the being partner is just being closer and getting better understanding, I guess, which is very important because yes, we have limited capacity in Turkey comparing to Far East productions, but when we look at these partnership issues, we can always improve and expand our capacities according to our customers' needs. That's simple as here. And, you know, we all talk about crisis. You know, every crisis comes as a risk. So we have to manage our risk, different risk for different extension. And every crisis coming from together with the opportunities. So we have to evaluate all these opportunities as well. So if we can get closer, we can restructure issues together. We are ready to cope with all those buyers in the market, because everybody is talking about new normal these days. What is going to be our new normal from your perspective and buyer's perspective, manufacturer's perspective? You know, being agile, as you mentioned, you know, right stuff in right time. So how are we going to address this right stuff in right time without, you know, getting closer? That's why Turkey is agile. We are ready for that. Prompt, you know, we have this understanding mainly for European buyers. You know, rather than just negotiating on the price, I think we have to have more information exchange, I guess. This is really important. And also, alongside with this relation, buyers and sellers, we need to find financial institutions involved in the business promptly, because when we just talking about inventory management for buyers and stores over there, we just were thinking about how they're going to pay us, whether they're going to pay us or not. That was our enemy and, you know, nightmare those days. Today we are a little bit, you know, relaxed because everybody's did whatever they have to and now settled and, you know, restructuring, and we start rethinking. how can we dream about our business, because we need dreams, because things are changed and we need a new approach, new way of looking the cases. You know, I try to get these opportunities. As Chris mentioned, PPA is very good opportunity for Turkey, for state and Europe as well. Honestly speaking, we are ready for that. And you know, normally Turkish PPA production companies were smaller entities, but because of this crisis happened, now we have entitled to get bigger opportunities for volume-wise and production-wise. We are ready for that. And some of our companies are already dealing with, for example, NHS of UK, which is really important for us. You know, good things happening in Turkey. We are ready to cope for all aspects. Thank you for your explanations. Especially, this was really nice, Chris. Made in Turkey is a brand. Thank you for that. I'll take it and I'll use it. Matthias, thank you very much for everything. It was really good participation. I hope this is a fruitful meeting for everyone. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you for having me. I appreciated talking here, and I learned a lot. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Mehmet.
By the way, I think we just lost him. If anybody wants my email address,